reversal of heart disease is so interesting because there was a time where we believed once plaque was laid down, nothing could change that it would just continue to get worse and worse and worse until the lifestyle heart trial in 1990. And Dean Ornish did a study where he used a low-fat plant-based diet, about 10% fat, stress management, group therapy, exercise, and 82% of his group, his experimental group, actually had reversal. And what was really interesting is these people were basically people who were told by their doctors, you're done. There's nothing more we can do for you. We've done the triple bypasses. Get your affairs in order. You're going to be gone within a year. And, 12, 14, 18, 20 years later, they're still doing well. And so this was really earth-shattering. And then not so long after, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who will be here speaking as well, did his research, and actually with Dean Ornish's, his experimental group 5 years later had 2.5 times fewer cardiac events than the control group that was doing, the sort of standard of care American Heart Association diet. But with Dr. Esselstyn, nobody that stuck to his program had recurrence. Nobody. And he came out with another study in 2014 where I think 0.6% of the people sticking to his diet had recurrence, and 62 or 63% of the people in the control, or it wasn't a control. It was the people that didn't follow the diet that 62% actually had an event. So this is really quite astounding. I don't know of any diets that have ever shown cardiac disease or heart disease reversal. And so this is important. And we can't underestimate the value of this. And, talking to physicians, I have the privilege of talking to physicians quite often. And I've had physicians say to me, and on a regular basis, I believe you, but I don't think my patients would ever do that. And so one of the things that I like to remind them of is what their responsibility as a physician really is. And their responsibility is to lay the options out on the table. Of course your patients won't do it if they don't even know about it. It's so important not to be paternalistic and to assume you know what your patient will or will not do. You don't. I can remember working in a cardiology clinic years ago. It was probably 25 years ago, and there was this big truck driver that came in. He must have been 300 pounds. And I remember thinking to myself, this guy was going to be dead in 5 years. He was in his 30s. And I thought his cholesterol and triglycerides were so high. And so I thought, he was eating a hot beef sandwich with gravy and French fries and pop for lunch and dinner pretty much every day. That's the truck stops. That's what they served. That's what he ate. And I can remember thinking to myself, like, why should I waste my breath? There's no way this guy's going to do anything. But I thought to myself, you need to lay his options out. So I told him that you can do a low-fat plant-based diet and see a reduction of, Dean Ornish, on average, it was 37% reduction in cholesterol and reversal of disease. Or you could do a Heart Association kind of diet that's, 20 to 30% of calories from fat and low saturated fat and so on and so forth. And you'll get a 5% reduction in cholesterol, and you'll be on medication for the rest of your life. Or you can continue doing as you're doing and die. It's really your choice. And he looked at me and he said, why would I do anything other than what would give me the very best chance of survival? I don't want to die. I'm 35 years old. And it was it hit me. That we cannot decide for our patients what they are or are not willing to do. All we can do is lay out those options, and we need to let them know what is possible. Because when people make these choices, it is absolutely life-changing. You can rebuild your body. Your body wants to heal itself. It will do everything in its power if you put the right tools in your mouth. The building blocks to rebuild your body properly and magic will happen. And so people need to know about that. They've got to know. And so we just have to have the courage to tell them and then let them decide. We can't decide for them. But they're the captains of their own ship. I'm a dietitian, physicians. We can't eat, we can't exercise for anybody. They're the only ones that can do that. All we can do is tell them what's possible. So I think that's really, really important. And yes, heart disease is absolutely reversible. No, I don't. And with all due respect to my absolutely cherished colleagues, Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Ornish, and others that are promoting a very low-fat plant-based diet, I believe that the research shows definitively that these diets work for reversing heart disease. And there's a little bit of research even with diabetes that they may be effective for that as well. But I think what people need to understand is just because a diet is effective for a very sick person to reverse heart disease, that works to reverse heart disease, does not make it the gold standard for everyone. I think it's risky to use a very low-fat diet for young children, even for athletes. Fat is actually important. It's important for our brains, and our eyes, our cell membranes, for all of those things. Fat also, it's what provides us with our essential fatty acids. Some of the very low-fat diets aren't providing enough essential fats. Also, it's very important for the absorption of fat-soluble nutrients. So, for example, vitamin A, carotenoids, vitamin E, vitamin D, these kinds of nutrients, many phytochemicals are fat-soluble. And in order to absorb them, we need to have some fat. So, like, let's say, for example, some people just pour a sugar dressing on their salad. They'll buy a fat-free dressing and think it's all healthy. Well, you'll absorb, a fraction of the phytochemicals from your salad that you would if you put a tahini-based dressing or a hemp seed-based dressing on your salad. So I think I actually believe, and I think the evidence is pretty clear, that nuts and seeds are protective, avocados are protective, that some of these higher fat plant foods are very, very beneficial. And the other thing is sometimes when people shift to a very low fat plant-based diet, and they're not conscious of refined carbohydrates. They end up eating a lot of refined carbohydrates. Their triglycerides go up, their HDL goes down, and they can actually increase risk by doing that. So people need to be careful. The other thing I've seen, which is people choosing foods on the basis of whether or not it contains fat. So they would choose a loaf of white bread over a loaf of bread with flax seeds because flax seeds have fat and fat's bad. So there's it's sort of an extreme example, but I've actually seen that in people. If something's fat-free, it must be good. So there's the fat-free Snackwell's cookies or whatever, and they must be good. And so I think we need to be cautious. So to me, the World Health Organization recommends a minimum of 15% of calories from fat. And I think for the average healthy individual, that's a really good starting point, because at 15%, then you'll be ensuring sufficient absorption of these protective nutrients and enough essential fatty acids. So I would say 15 to 25 is probably a good range when the fat is coming from whole plant foods, higher fat whole plant foods. Well, cancer is tricky. So one of the things, like, let's say you had 100 people with colon cancer, and you divided, you put half on conventional treatment, you give them chemo, radiation, whatever they need. And the other half you said, well, we're going to put you on green juices and you're going to do this diet. It would never pass any ethical board, because basically you've got what is considered the evidence-based standard, their standard of care. And so you couldn't just use an unproven therapy for these other people that might die if they don't receive this treatment. So that makes it really difficult. However, we have evidence that people consuming plant-based diets have less DNA damage, better DNA repair. They have fewer toxic metabolites in their stools. They have better gut microflora. They have better, lower levels of inflammation, lower levels of IGF-1. So all of these factors that are kind of cancer promoters are reduced. So that's some decent evidence. And then the other evidence that I think is among the most compelling bits of evidence we have is from Dean Ornish again. So after he finished his cardiovascular disease research, he went on to prostate cancer research. In 2005, he did a study that showed that PSA levels on people doing plant-based were reduced about 4%. And well, first of all, he had a group of men who chose not to get treatment for their very slow-growing prostate cancer. And so, he put, I think 49 of them on just control, and 44 went on this lifestyle program. And the ones that went on the lifestyle program, their PSA decreased. The ones that were doing nothing, their PSA increased. After a year, 6 of the people that were in the control group actually had to start treatment because their disease had progressed sufficiently that they felt they needed to start therapy. And then the other thing that was very cool was the serum of the people on the plant-based diet killed 70%. 70% more cancer cells than the people in the 70%. Yeah, it was 70% versus some other percent of cancer cells that were killed, and so it was 8 times more is what it was than the people in the control group. So very, very interesting. And then he went on to prove that you could actually change the expression of your genes by doing plant-based for just 3 months. He reported it was about 453, I think close to 500 disease cancer-promoting genes that were downregulated, and about 48 cancer-preventing genes that were upregulated by going on a plant-based diet. Unbelievable. This was earth-shattering. We can change the expression of our genes. And then he went on to show in 2013 that you could actually change the length of your telomeres by eating a healthy diet. So telomeres are the ends of the chromosomes that sort of tell you how long you're going to live. And normally, as you get older, they just shrink and shrink and shrink. Well, adopting a healthy lifestyle, and they actually start to get bigger. And so this was, again, it was pretty earth-shattering. So he's done some work that would give us indication that adopting a plant-based diet could be a very effective strategy for cancer treatment, even if you're doing it in conjunction with conventional treatment. It can do nothing but good. And the answer is a very, very clear yes. So we have several dozen studies. I looked at studies between 1994 and 2008, and there were 24 studies. And it's very consistent. They both are very highly protective against cancer, but raw vegetables are more protective. And there are several reasons for that. Number one is that they're higher in phytochemicals. Number two is that when you cook vegetables, you change the effect of the fiber in the food. And that can alter the effect they have on your gastrointestinal system. Number three is raw vegetables contain enzymes that convert phytochemicals into their active forms. And so one of those enzymes is called myrosinase in cruciferous vegetables, and it actually turns on phase 2 enzymes, which help to change carcinogens into water-soluble compounds so we can excrete them from the body. So for example, in cruciferous vegetables, you have these compounds called glucosinolates that get converted into isothiocyanates like sulforaphane. And sulforaphane is needed in this, kicks in this phase 2 enzyme system. So that's another reason that raw vegetables may provide some advantage. And of course, when you cook, you lose some nutrients that may be cancer-fighting nutrients as well. So there are several reasons why raw foods may provide an advantage over, or do provide an advantage over cooked. Both, the more vegetables you eat, the better you do. But raw are more powerful in terms of cancer prevention. than cooked.